Can you hear me now? What about now? Now? Okay. Yeah. No. Now? No. Yep. Now. Trek Bikes, Fuel EX, you can hear me now. We're in Whistler, BC to test some of the latest and most interesting trail bikes, and Trek's completely revised Fuel EX certainly makes it onto that list. While many of us remember the Fuel EX as a lightweight and speedy trail bike, the latest version is by far the most capable that Trek has ever produced. Travel has been bumped up to 140 millimeters out back via their ABP suspension layout and, finally, a normal shock, and that's paired with a 150 millimeter travel fork. Now, speaking of shocks, this is the first Fuel EX that you could put a coil-sprung shock on, with a flip chip at the lower mount to add more progressivity. Progressivity. That's not it either. You could even put on a 27.5-inch rear wheel if you're looking for a mullet setup, and an angle-adjusting headset lets you run the head angle between 65.5 and as slack as 63.5 degrees. Other details include a storage hole in the down tube, internal routing, and the world's longest down tube protector, as well as no knock block to be seen. Our test bike is the top of the range 9.9 XX1 Axis model that retails for $10,749 American. That, as the name suggests, comes with some pretty fancy components. Let's head to the testers to see how it performed out on the trail. Let's talk about climbing first. Kaz, a lot has changed with this bike, like we said, and most importantly, the suspension feels quite different. Previous bikes, they were very active. Sometimes I definitely did like to reach down and flip that switch. They could feel quite deep. How did you feel about the climbing on this thing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more support now. Before there was just kind of always the Trek trademark, basically. Pretty soft, comfy, but you just didn't get that nice burst of energy when you really mashed on the pedals, and this one has that. You get a little motion if you're pedaling squares, but overall, just kind of cruises up the hill nicely. And same thing if you're flatter terrain, you just really need to pedal. It stays nice and calm. Yeah,
I would agree with that too. They've also done a pretty good job with the handling of this thing. It feels like it fits in places that maybe the Scott Genius doesn't, even though like this is a pretty slack, longish bike as well too for what it is. But I had an easier time on techie, kind of jumbly sections of climbs on the Trek than I did on the Scott. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat, which is interesting because on paper, the geometry numbers are really similar between the two. The Scott's a little slacker. It's at ½ degree, but not much. And the reach number is about the same. But yeah, I think just the positioning and the way that this one handles the terrain, it's definitely kind of an easy one to maneuver around at slower speeds.
Yeah, I would say that Trek is like a lot of these brands, they're doing a really good job of adding downhill performance. We're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but still having a bike like these modern trail bikes. They just tractor up all the things. They have all the traction, a good position thanks to a relatively steep seat tube, and yeah, just all around decent climber, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you mentioned that steep seat tube angle. That was one of the criticisms we had in the past of some of Trek's bikes. It just wasn't that steep. You kind of ended up further over the back of the bike. You don't get that with the Fuel EX. The chainstay is also a little bit longer. We've got 440 millimeters, so it's really easy to have a nice balanced position while climbing, and I think that helps in the tight stuff. And just kind of, you're in a good position to maneuver.
Yeah, exactly. So between the angles, that really hides the length, and the suspension, which is definitely more efficient than previous bikes, this thing is a great climber. Let's move on to descending aboard this Fuel EX, and this descends unlike any other Fuel EX that I've ever ridden, that's for sure. And why is that, Kaz?
I mean, I think they've really nailed the suspension tune on this one, and maybe it's because it doesn't have any strange proprietary bits to it.
No weird through shaft things, it's a normal shock.
Yeah, it's a normal shock, custom tune for this bike, but that's pretty typical with most manufacturers. But that tune itself is very good. Yeah. Like we said, it's supportive on the climbs, it's supportive on, rolling, kind of flatter bits of trail, but when it points down, it just kind of feels like it's nice and open, has a good fluttery feel without being too mushy or too wallowy. Because again, there is only 140 millimeters of travel, so you want to make the most of it, and I think they've done a great job with this. And it also has that flip chip so you can adjust how progressive it is.
Yeah.
So for riders that want to run a coil shock, which a coil on a Fuel X, you know, a few years ago that would have seemed kind of crazy, but this, like we said, it's a totally different bike, so totally appropriate to run a coil shock on it if you'd like, or if you just want a little bit more ramp up at the end of the stroke, you can just flip that chip, put the shock in a different position, and kind of adjust the ride quality.
That's wild, Kaz. A Fuel X, you can relax this thing out to 63.5 degrees, have a coil shock on it, a 160 fork, and mullet. We didn't do any of that. We wrote it in the stock settings, but I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. And I also want to add something else to the suspension stuff too. I've ridden, I think, pretty much every generation Fuel EX, you know, starting like 15 or 16 years ago or something. And I mean, we've said this many times before, those older bikes, they tended to want to use a lot of their travel, and that, I feel, kind of stole some of the, I'm only allowed to use this word twice in our field test reviews. It stole some of the energy from the bike, where this thing, it's more forgiving, but at the same time, it wants to jump, it wants to pop over stuff. It's just like a really good balance of everything.
Yeah, I think this one definitely feels better at those higher speeds compared to the other ones, where the only other ones almost felt like you just kind of, I don't know, they've rewarded that kind of meandering cruise into the woods, where this one, if you're someone that likes to be aggressive, likes to push it, this thing, it can support that really well. I mean, like I said, we've been spending some time in the Whistler Bike Park. Right now the trails are rough and fast. This thing took everything well. It just did a great job at it.
Yeah, let's talk about speed, because like you said, Kaz, we were riding some very fast trails in the bike park, appropriate trails, nothing that the bike shouldn't be ridden on, but at high speeds, this thing is just so composed. I was having a ton of fun playing around, and it lets you, it sort of opens up the envelope a bit. So you can go fast, but at the same time, you have room to like go over here and jump off this thing and slide around that. And it just felt like a very forgiving bike. And again, that comes down to the geometry, much longer front end, much slacker front end. It all comes together to make a bike that just is easy to ride quickly.
Yep, exactly. It has a nice muted feel too. So there's that energy, but then if you do kind of land in a nasty hole or land in some rough stuff, it just kind of goes thunk, and you can kind of keep plowing forward. So I like that. Again, it kind of comes back to that shock tune and what they have going on there. They did a great job.
Let's talk about what the clock told us next. For the efficiency test, this was actually the quickest bike up the hill, Kaz, minute 53 seconds. I mean, I'm not overly surprised. It feels like that on the trail. So but what about the downhill times?
Yeah, actually on the downhill times, it was the fastest. I put down my fastest lap on
this. Oh, really?
One. Yeah. Okay. You know, it wasn't a drastic amount, but it was by a second. So it was the quickest. And it does feel fast too. I think, again, we're going to keep going back to it, but descending and climbing, it just has a nice quickness to it. I think, you know, a little while ago we reviewed the Top Fuel, and I think with that one we talked about, that's a lot sportier bike, but it has that feel of just, when you step on the pedals, good acceleration. I think that carries over, that kind of some similarities between the way that the suspension feels.
Let's move on and talk about some components and some of the details on this frame, because a lot has changed. We do have a couple complaints as well. One of the things that I want to mention, it has a full-length down tube guard on it, which is great. It's great for hanging the bike over a tailgate. Obviously going to prevent damage from rocks and stuff like that. But the top section is kind of like bowed away from the frame a bit, and it kind of looks like kind of cheesy.
Yeah, I mean, you can remove it, but yeah, it's kind of like, I like that it's there, but if there's a way to make it just look a little more flush, more of an optical thing than anything. But yeah. See what else? There's one thing we spoke about, the adjustable headset. So basically, you can remove the lower cup. You have to press it in; it doesn't just drop out. And then you have to purchase aftermarket the other adjustable cups. The one that has a,
which is neat. It's
neat, but you have to purchase them.
Right.
So that is a downside for people that want to make this the slackest or the steepest Fuel EX possible. You do have to purchase those parts after the fact. It doesn't come with it.
63.5 to 65.5 though.
Yeah, it's
that's
a big range.
Adjustment so that I want to see.
No, and it's cool. And it's, you know, there's a lot of parallels to Specialized Stump Jumper Evo. It's been doing that for a couple of years, and I think that's been very well received. And if you're gonna emulate something, that's a great bike to do. Yeah. That one is a little easier to adjust also, because you don't have to drop. Yes. You don't have to knock the lower headset cup out if you wanted to switch it. Like with the Stump Jumper, it's a matter of just taking off the that cup, rotating it, putting a different one in. It just drops in, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah. Otherwise, I guess another component gripe that I have, it's the integrated handlebar stem combo.
Oh, I like it. It's neat.
It is neat, but I think it's a little too stiff for my liking.
Yeah.
You know, just And again, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes where harshness is coming from, but having ridden this bike with a regular, we'll say regular carbon bar and that one, I find this one to get more feedback.
Noticeable difference.
Noticeable difference.
Yeah.
So again, not everyone will find that to be a detriment, but for me,
you could probably save $1,000 if you ditch that one piece of carbon bar. It's got tie bolts.
It's very fancy. It is, you know, I mean, and the position, again, that position feels comfy, which is kind of cool, at least with the bikes we have here on Tested. Do have the integrated bar stem. Both of us are getting along with them, but again, it does take away some of that adjustability if you want a shorter stem, longer stem, higher rise bar. And that one, like I said, that bar happens to be particularly stiff, at least seems that way to me.
Last detail, and we move on. Cable routing is so close. It is so close to being amazing. Yeah, it's inside, it's well done, but then at the rear brake line, it comes out and it runs along the inside of the chainstays and is zip tied to it. And there's certainly nothing wrong with it, but compared to the rest of the bike, it would be cleaner if it was inside the stays the whole way, sort of like some other kinds.
I guess that's true. I guess it's a little exposed, but yeah, that's like on the list of gripes. That one's like
pretty small.
This big.
We're going to talk about models next, and Kaz is hopefully going to tell us that there are much less expensive models. This is a very fancy bike, and hopefully models that come in different colors than this like bile-colored yellow thing. It's kind of weird. I'm not a fan, but that's subjective.
Yeah, and luckily the answer is yes to both of those questions. This particular frame comes in black as well. Trek also has their Project One customization thing, so if you want to go all out, you could probably get any color you wanted. And then as far as prices go and other models, again, a fairly extensive lineup in this case, and they have aluminum versions as well. So it's a good way to save some money. There's one, I think it's around the $4,300 mark, XT drivetrain, aluminum frame.
That's the one.
Yeah, so there's ways to save money, gain a little bit of weight. You still get the down tube storage, which is cool. So aluminum frame still has the integrated little compartment to put all your snacks and things in there. So again, you don't need to spend $10,700, lots of dollars.
All the dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the aluminum one has all of the same frame features too, like this, not just the storage, it also has all the adjustments as well. So you can make it just as slack and just as steep and mullet it, coil shock, all the things.
Yeah, exactly. So you gain probably a pound and a half, but again, good way to save some money without losing out on much performance.
Yeah. Should we talk pros and cons?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm gonna start off with the good stuff, and this is gonna be something you're gonna hear with all of these field test reviews. This bike is really well-rounded. Like, it pedals well, the suspension is supportive, it has lots of traction, I'm smashing the shit out of it in the bike park, and it worked really well. Like, I don't know, Kaz, it just works everywhere. The other thing here is this bike can be a lot of different bikes for a lot of different people. You can make it as steep as 65.5, as slack as 63.5. Like, I might want it steeper than Kaz wants it. Kaz might want to put a small wheel on the back. I would never dream of that, 29 front and rear. So, I mean, it could be a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
I think we should also mention the wide range of sizes that comes in. Trek also has we're reviewing the large here, which has been working well for the 5'11"-ish height that we're at. But there's a medium large for people that might kind of normally find themselves on the cusp of two sizes. That medium large slots right in there nicely. So just nice to have such a big variety of options to really get the bike that fits you as well as possible.
Cons, Kaz?
Cons is a hard one. I mean, off the top of my head, I would, we mentioned it'd be nice to see if the adjustable headset cups came with the bike. But again, most people out of the box, that 64.5 head angle, the way it's set is pretty good. So I can understand why they didn't include it.
I'll mention something actually, I just thought of this. I noticed the paint on our bike chips really easily.
Yeah, that would be a con, especially on this one, this paint. We've seen it in the past on some Trek bikes where it seems like it just wants to flake off, and it's had a hard life, but it's been a short life so far, realistically. So yeah, I'd say the paint chipping is definitely a con. If you spent that much money, it'd be pretty sad to see it chipping like that.
Yeah, I mean, pretty impressive bike though.
Yeah,
we're here complaining about the paint
chips. I mean, it's a mountain bike. It's been seeing some things, and it does have the down tube protection, so you don't have to worry about the paint chipping there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's struggling for cons, and that's a good sign. That means that Trek has done a great job with this bike. Super well-rounded, very versatile, and the fact that it's so adjustable lets you build it up to make it just suit exactly the terrain that you like to ride.
Kaz, let's finish this review by you telling the people who this bike is for.
This bike is for almost anybody. I know, like just again, the adjustability. You can make this just tailor-made for your terrain.
Yeah.
You're the kind of person that just wants to go up a steep fire road climb, bomb down the steepest thing on the other side, buy those aftermarket cups, make it nice and slack, maybe put the mullet configuration. Or if you kind of want just a little bit more of an all-rounder bike, you put it in steep setting. It's gonna feel nice and lively, pedals well. So yeah, this could almost be for anybody.
Yep. There you go. Trek's new Fuel EX. I mean, it's pretty much a home run, everybody. This bike works really well in a lot of different places. And like Kaz said, it could be a lot of bike for a lot of different people. So there you go. Let us know what you think of the new Fuel EX in the comments below. Do you guys like this color? Or would you rather it be black? Let us know what you think, and stay tuned for more reviews from our fall trail bike field test in Whistler, BC. I barely got that one out, but we got her out. Cut!